Who was Christopher Columbus, really? And what should he be celebrated for? What's in the news with stories on sex robot brothels, Rand Paul, Pentagon power, new FAA regulations, and California controls companies. Finally, a Statists Gonna State segment on the state of Texas defining pickles. This episode is brought to you by ZenCash, now known as Horizen, a cryptocurrency that infuses privacy, anonymity, and security done right. Also brought to you by Free Talk Live, providing you with fresh, pro-liberty content 7 days a week on more than 180 radio stations across the country.
Welcome to The Lava Flow, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Find us at thelavaflow.com. Here's your host, Roger Paxton.
Thank you for joining me this week from the home of William Plummer, the only elector in the 1820 presidential election to vote against incumbent James Monroe. This is the show that will bring you the people, places, and events that everyone in the Liberty Rebellion needs to know. You can catch me on Twitter at the Lava Flow Pod. This is episode 107. Columbus was a monster. And it's Wednesday, October 10th, 2018, when there have already been more than 750 people killed by police this year, and the United States stat clock shows us at more than $21,615,200 million in debt. What's wrestling my jimmies this week? You're about to find out. Let's do it to it. As with most things the government does, government-mandated holidays are usually full of bullshit and propaganda. Columbus Day is, of course, no different. Christopher Columbus may have first left his mark on the Americas in the 15th century, but the U.S. didn't establish a federal holiday in his honor until 1937. Commissioned by Spanish King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to explore Asia, Columbus instead sailed to the New World in 1492. He first disembarked in the Bahamas, a long way from Asia, later making his way to Cuba and the island of Hispanola, now the home of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Believing that he had located China and Japan, Columbus founded the first Spanish colony in the Americas with the help of nearly 40 crew members. The following spring, he traveled back to Spain, where he presented Ferdinand and Isabella with spices, minerals, and indigenous peoples that he'd captured. It would take 3 trips back to the New World for Columbus to determine that he hadn't located Asia after all, but a continent altogether unfamiliar to the Spanish. By the time he died in 1506, Columbus had crisscrossed the Atlantic numerous times. Native American groups argue that the Italian explorer's arrival in the New World ushered in genocide against indigenous people, as well as the transatlantic slave trade. Essentially, this is a holiday to highlight Western imperialism and the conquest of people of color. The circumstances surrounding Christopher Columbus's foray into the Americas have led to an end to Columbus Day observations in some areas of the U.S. In such regions, the contributions Native Americans have made to the country are recognized instead. But these places and exceptions are not the rule. Columbus Day remains today a mainstay in nearly all U.S. cities and states. To change this, activists opposed to these celebrations have launched a multi-pronged argument to demonstrate why Columbus Day should be eradicated. So let's look at this controversy and see where I stand on it. First, don't give me this bullshit that Columbus discovered America. We knew long ago that that wasn't really the case. It's rubbish, and we all know it. Hell, he wasn't even the first white man to land in America. Several hundred years prior to him, Vikings explored the New World. Polynesians settled in the New World long before Columbus did as well. There's also the fact that when Columbus did arrive in the Americas in 1492, more than 100 million people already inhabited the New World. G. Rebecca Dobbs wrote in her essay, Why We Should Abolish Columbus Day, that to suggest that Columbus discovered America is to suggest that those who inhabited the Americas are non-entities. Dobbs argues, how can anyone discover a place which tens of millions already know about? To assert that this can be done is to say that those inhabitants are not human. And in fact, this is exactly the attitude many Europeans displayed towards indigenous Americans. We know, of course, that this is not true. But to perpetuate the idea of a Columbian discovery is to continue to assign a non-human status to those 145 million people and their descendants. And let's talk about these 100+ million people that were here tens of thousands of years before any white man. Columbus treated them as slaves and kidnapped many of them. In his own words, he said, "They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them. For I showed them a sword, they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts." Columbus had two goals in the Caribbean, to find gold and to find slaves. Columbus returned home to Spain and came back to the Caribbean with 17 ships and 1,200 men. His men traveled from island to island, taking Indians as captives. In 1495, in a large slave raid, Columbus and his men rounded up 1,500 Arawak men, women, and children and put them in pens. They selected what they considered the best natives and loaded them onto ships back to Spain. 200 died en route. After the survivors were sold as slaves in Spain, Columbus later wrote, "Let us, in the name of the Holy Trinity, go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." But slaves weren't enough for Columbus or for the Spanish monarchy. Columbus needed to bring back gold. Columbus and his crew believed there were gold fields in the province of Cacao in Haiti. He and his men ordered all natives 14 years or older to collect a certain amount of gold every 3 months. Natives who didn't collect enough gold had their hands cut off. But it was an impossible task. There was virtually no gold around, only a little dust in streams. Many natives fled and were consequently hunted down and killed by the Spaniards. Facing extermination, the Arawaks organized and attempted to fight back against the Spaniards. But they were little match against the armor, muskets, swords, and horses of the Europeans. The Spaniards hung or burned Indians that they took captive. By this point, the Arawaks began committing mass suicide. They fed cassava poison to their infants to save them from the Spanish. In 2 years, half of the 250,000 Indians on Haiti were dead, either through murder, mutilation, or suicide. By 1550, there were 500 Indians. By 1650, the Arawaks had been wiped out from the island completely. Lawrence Bergreen, who wrote the book Columbus, The Four Voyages, had this to say about the Arawaks under Columbus's exploitation. The Indians destroyed their stores of bread so that neither they nor the invaders would be able to eat it. They plunged off cliffs, they poisoned themselves with roots, and they starved themselves to death. Oppressed by the impossible requirements to deliver tributes of gold, the Indians were no longer able to tend their fields or care for their sick, children, and elderly. They had given up and committed mass suicide to avoid being killed or captured by Christians, and to avoid sharing their land with them, their fields, groves, beaches, forests, and women, the future of their people. And yes, the Spanish under Columbus, and with his blessing, shared the Arawak women. And by shared, I mean raped and brutalized. Michel de Cuneo, who participated in Columbus's second expedition to the Americas, had this to say about one of his raping of an Arawak woman that was given to him by Columbus. "While I was in the boat, I captured a very beautiful woman, whom the Lord Admiral Columbus gave to me. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with a desire to take my pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling, and so treated me with her nails that I wished I had never begun. I then took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly, and she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually, we came to such terms, I assure you, that you would have thought she had been brought up in a school for whores." Disgusting. And apparently it wasn't just the women. Young girls were sold into sexual slavery as well. Columbus himself, in a letter to a friend of the Spanish queen, said, "There are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand, and for all ages a good price must be paid." Look, Christopher Columbus was a monster, period. Yet our kids are being taught in public school that he is a hero who discovered America. If there was ever a reason to get your kids out of public indoctrination centers, this is one of them. Not only are your kids being taught propaganda, but they are taught completely false information that promotes Western imperialism. Columbus should not be celebrated. He should be reviled as a rapist, slaverer, and murderer. Fuck Columbus and anybody who celebrates him in the neck. So when little Jimmy and Sally come home from school this week with their Christopher Columbus diorama with the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Marie, make sure to tell them the true story of this man and the horrors that he brought with him. Have you subscribed to the Lava Flow on iTunes or any mobile device yet? Then what's wrong with you? Go to thelavaflow.com/subscribe so you don't miss a minute of the show. And while you're subscribing, make sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review the show to help others find our podcast. thelavaflow.com/subscribe.
It's time to shake up your podcast feed, folks, by subscribing to Lions of Liberty, the only libertarian variety show out there. Spend Mondays with me, Mark Claire, as I feature in-depth interviews with great names in the libertarian community and fun roundtable discussions.
Electric Liberty Land with me, Brian McWilliams, every Wednesday, your weekly dose of comedy, culture, and liberty.
And Felony Fridays with me, John Odermatt, where I expose injustice in the broken criminal justice system.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and at lionsofliberty.com.
This is Chris Spangle, and I am the host of We Are Libertarians, which you can find in iTunes, Google Play, or at wearelibertarians.com. We are a podcast that brings you all of the irreverence that modern politics deserves by examining current events from a libertarian perspective. So please, check us out at wearelibertarians.com.
What's in the news? The news you need to know from a libertarian perspective.
In virtual sin news, Houston City Council members voted unanimously Wednesday to ban a sex robot brothel set to open soon near the Galleria area. The ordinance allows the business to sell the sex robots, but not to allow customers to use them inside the business. The vote followed a citywide uproar after the controversial business announced plans to open the brothel on Richmond. It would have been the first such business to open in the United States. Councilman Greg Travis said, "I know there's some people that will sit there and say, what does the city of Houston have to do with any of this? And the answer is, we're not getting into your bedroom, but don't bring it into our district. Don't bring it into our city. This is not a good business for our city. We are not Sin City." Matthew Festa, a professor of law at the South Texas College of Law Houston, said, "It's perfectly within the city's very broad powers to regulate sexually oriented businesses. The business certainly has the right to fight the ordinance, but if it passes in council, it's not going to be hard to overturn." Very broad powers? What the actual fuck? Please tell us, serfs, what is not included in those very broad powers if the destruction of private property rights is in those powers. Several Houstonians spoke out against the business during a city council meeting last week. Pastor Vega, one of the speakers at the meeting, said, "A business like this would destroy homes, families, finances of our neighbors, and cause major community uproars in the city." Seriously? Come on, people, this is just fucking insanity. Virginia Meyerless said, "As a woman, I am concerned and horrified to see where our society is taking us." And the closest example of cognitive dissonance I've seen in a long time is due to Elijah Rising, an organization that works to end sex trafficking. They presented a petition against this business, which has more than 13,000 signatures. Seriously? This business can only be good for ending sex trafficking, because it will lower the demand for the more expensive areas of the sex trade, which includes sex trafficking. If demand is down, then supply will also have to go down. This just makes no sense at all. Why would they be against this? This makes me want to open a sex robot brothel in New Hampshire. In falling far from the tree news, Senator Rand Paul has issued a statement on the Brett Kavanaugh issue. I've been asked personally several times the last couple of weeks what I think of Brett Kavanaugh, and my answer always is, well, I don't think about Brett Kavanaugh. He's just another fucking ruler who wants to tell us how to live. He doesn't deserve my thoughts. Rand Paul, however, thinks differently. He said, "Having looked at the totality of Brett Kavanaugh's life and career, I am persuaded to vote for him today. The preponderance of evidence from hundreds of people who knew him and worked with him indicates he is a good man, with a good reputation for integrity and character. Judge Kavanaugh is qualified, he has been vetted, and he should be concerned." This makes me wonder what Rand's dad would have said on Kavanaugh if he were still around, but I can't find any public remarks Ron has made on Kavanaugh. I can only imagine that Ron would be very against this nomination. But again, does it really matter? All of this brouhaha has done one thing for our rulers. It has shown them that we concede that they have the power to rule over us. It has shown that the majority will crawl on hands and knees, begging one side or the other for scraps from their tables. The majority has not only conceded, but they have encouraged these bastards on both sides. The majority have fallen for their tricks yet again. If they can keep people divided and keep them fighting for one side or the other, then they can continue to rule over us. Well, I don't concede. I don't encourage the bastards. I hope you do the same. ZenCash has changed their name to Horizen to better represent their transition from a pure cryptocurrency to a pioneering platform that protects consumer data. They're focusing more on the wider vision of what ZenCash was all about. The new name, Horizen, reinforces that the project is forward-thinking and visionary and will broaden the horizons of what the community can accomplish in the world using the platform. Not only is it one of the best privacy-oriented cryptocurrencies with zero-knowledge technology built into it, but they also have private chat over their network. And soon, Horizen will include the ability to publish information and go anywhere on the web, all with complete privacy. They are working toward the day when anyone will be able to build privacy-based applications on the Horizen platform and generate income from them. This will allow Horizen to bring thousands of real-life services to the community, services that provide freedom, utility, and privacy. The unique spelling of Horizen is a nod to their heritage and recognizes that they remain committed to the vision that their project was built upon. Their coin and ticker symbol remains Zen. So ZenCash is now Horizen, and Horizen is bringing privacy to life. You can learn more at horizen.global. That's HORIZEN.global. In Pentagon Power News, senators, notably Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, are pushing for clarification from the Pentagon about their interpretation of the concept of collective self-defense, under which the U.S. military claims a near-limitless power to conduct unilateral strikes on enemies not authorized by Congress. The expansion of the notion that military forces have a right to self-defense if they are attacked was expanded to a collective right, which allows the U.S. to intervene when anyone the Pentagon identifies as a partner is either under attack or faces a conceivable threat from someone else. The Pentagon has affirmed in recent correspondence with Senator Kaine that this is how they view things, and that, moreover, it is not typically limited to particular groups or individuals committing the hostile act or demonstrating the hostile intent. This means, in effect, they can attack targets Congress has never authorized them to target, so long as they select some partner that could potentially benefit from the attack. Senator Kaine noted that this is a problem, of course, because the Pentagon is flat out saying they don't need to be authorized to go after the hostile actor, and also does not provide Congress with a list of who the partners they have are. Meaning this whole calculation on who the Pentagon is allowed to attack can happen entirely behind the scenes, and to the extent that the public or Congress are ever given a justification, it can be long after the fact. This is how the Pentagon has been behaving as well, with actions like targeting Shiite militias or Russian mercenaries in Syria, neither of whom Congress has ever authorized, on the grounds that they were engaged in hostile actions against rebel factions that the U.S., at least for the purposes of these attacks, were labeled partners at the time. This is your military-industrial complex at work, folks. This is what President Dwight Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address when he said, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." You know, it's sad when even a statist warmonger like Eisenhower could see it. In controlling the air news, President Donald Trump signed legislation passed by Congress that extends FAA policy for another 5 years. The Federal Aviation Administration's reauthorization bill includes several provisions that will affect air travelers. One provision that's attracted the most attention is the Seat Egress and Air Transit Act, SEAT, which directs the FAA to set standards for the size of airline seats. The agency has 1 year to come up with minimum requirements for seat width and for the space between seats. The FAA legislation also includes other stipulations. It bars carriers from involuntarily removing passengers who've already boarded, a rule with echoes of the passenger dragging incident on United in April of 2017. Also, passengers would be barred from making voice calls in flight and using e-cigarettes. Currently, no U.S. airline allows that now, but the bill would preclude any from doing so. The bill also gives the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security new authority to disable or destroy drones if they pose a threat to government facilities. The Trump administration had said it did not have legal authority to address such threats. Look, the government has the belief that they have the power to control literally everything, including how much legroom you get on an airplane. It also wants to unilaterally decide who can be pulled off a plane that is owned by a private company. Can a government bureaucrat really decide with a little bit of law who is truly trespassing? Of course not. But they sure think they can. One of the largest reaching liberty programs today is Free Talk Live, with a 3-hour radio program 7 nights a week on more than 180 radio stations across the country. They are so influential on talk radio that they are the number 27 radio program in the country, according to Talkers Magazine. They also have a daily podcast that's been voted Best Political Podcast 5 times by podcastawards.com. The hosts of Free Talk Live are street preachers for the ideas of liberty. They take the message of peace, liberty, and cryptocurrency to the masses on the radio, where they are not preaching to the choir. You can listen via podcast or live via audio streaming or the Twitch or YouTube channels at freetalklive.com. I listen to their podcast myself every single morning when I get up to get a fresh perspective on news and very, very strong libertarian perspectives. Make sure to add them to your feed at freetalklive.com. In power-hungry news, companies headquartered in California can no longer have all male boards of directors. That's according to a new law enacted Sunday, which requires publicly traded firms in the state to place at least one woman on their board of directors by the end of 2019 or face a penalty. It also requires companies with 5 directors to add 2 women by the end of 2021, and companies with 6 or more directors to add at least 3 more women by the end of the same year. It's the first such law in the books in the United States, although similar measures are common in European, read socialist, countries. This measure was passed by California's state legislature last month, and it was signed into law by Governor Jerry Brown this past weekend, along with a trove of other bills that took to protect and support women, children, and working families, the governor's office said in a release. California State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson told the Wall Street Journal last month when the legislation passed that 1/4 of California's publicly traded companies still do not have a single woman on their board, despite numerous independent studies that show companies with women on their board are more profitable and productive. And this is the crux of the matter. If it were really true that having more women on boards made companies more profitable and productive, then this issue would have taken care of itself relatively soon. This would be because those companies with women on their boards would gain market share due to increases in profit and production, while companies without would slow down or die. Boards are primarily concerned with one thing: profit. And if something as simple as adding women to your board actually increased profit, you would see this happening much more already. Kramer said California's legislation is weak compared to the laws in Norway and other European countries, which require a certain percentage of women on boards. For larger Norwegian companies, the legislation requires that women make up as much as 40% of the board. But no matter what they say, governments are not concerned about the profitability and productivity of companies. They are trying to do one thing: assert their authority, and they're working hard to make an egalitarian society. That's their motivation, nothing more. They just think it will be more palatable if they say it's in the best interest of the companies. Bullshit. Because, some bureaucrat knows what's best for a company than their own boards do. Go figure. In some personal news, I was recently on Free Talk Live for a full show last week, and I had a blast. I'm going to be a recurring co-host on the show the first Thursday of every month. When I was on last week, there was a caller into the show named Big Loaf, and he had some really awesome things to say about the lava flow, so I wanted to give him a shout out here. Thanks, Big Loaf. Here's the short segment where he called in.
freetalklive.com. Let's go back to the phones. We've got Big Loaf calling in from North Carolina. Big Loaf, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. And Roger, I'd just like to say specifically to you, thank you for your courage and all the great podcast material you're putting out there. Look forward to that, every fortnight doing what you do to people in the neck. It's awesome to hear someone that's unapologetically anarchist, right? So keep on keeping it real and doing what you do, especially since I just happened to be flipping across YouTube and saw this Chris Spangle guy, right? do you know who he is?
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine out of Indiana. He runs the We Are Libertarians podcast.
Yeah, what's up with this status American flag on his wall, right? I mean, what's this guy doing?
Well, Chris loves to troll. He is a very big troll and a meme warrior and all of that sort of thing. He's
a libertarian.
He's a libertarian, and he's more libertarian than most, but I would not go so far as to say that he is a pure voluntarist libertarian by any means, but Chris is a good guy.
Right. Well, I think he's given his co-host drugs because they just look totally zoned out, and he's given a diatribe about his life. And I'm watching this, and I was like, Roger Paxson's on Free Talk Live. They thank him for his courage, remind everybody to donate to him, and amp.freetalk live for Free Talk Live. And yeah, just keep on doing what you do.
Big Loaf, thank you for the call. And since he mentioned you do have a podcast.
I have a few, yeah.
You actually have a podcast network.
I do. It's Pax Libertas Productions, paxlibertas.com, and we've got 7 podcasts right now. The flagship one, my main podcast, is The Lava Flow, and LAVA stands for Libertarian, Anarcho-capitalist, Voluntarist, and Agorist. And I do a half an hour per week show, basically just talking about current events, but not the current events that you hear on the news. I'm not going to talk about Kavanaugh.
Right.
I'm going to talk about encroachments by our government and where they're really hurting us left and right and hurting the little people. I'm not talking about these big deals that everybody else talks about.
Right. And I've been a longtime listener, supporter of your show.
Thanks so much for calling in, Big Loaf. It was awesome hearing from you. Exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per episode donation of as little as $1 an episode. Or use Bitcoin. Get exclusive content, rewards, and help the Lava Flow become fiscally neutral while providing you more content. thelavaflow.com/support.
Are those dry, boring, run-of-the-mill political talk shows putting you to sleep on your commute or at work? Are you ready for some fun?
Look no further. Blast Off with Johnny Rocket is a Seattle-based podcast expressing viewpoints of free markets, voluntary exchange, badass music, wicked banner, and of course, drinking.
The Blast Off doesn't shy from the truth, but always brings the party.
Let's rock and roll, Raylene.
Bring it on, Johnny.
You can check us out at thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Again, that's thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Launchpad Media. Always launching ideas in your direction.
And now I'm crying over you. America, 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 fuck yeah, coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah, America, fuck yeah, freedom is the only way, yeah, terrorists, your game.
Statists Gonna State.
Statists literally want to control every single aspect of your life, period. This is why they tell you how much water your toilet should flush when you take a leak, or, as Texas does, they tell you how you have to define your food. Anita and Jim McHaney are retirees who moved from Houston to the Texas countryside in 2013. Their plan was to live well and grow food on a 10-acre homestead, earning extra money selling produce at the local farmers market. They grew okra, carrots, kale, Swiss chard, and beets. Lots and lots of beets. Anita said, "That soil out there is very sandy, and those beets just grew like mad. Now, the obvious thing to do when you have more beets than you can sell is to make pickled beets and can them." And this is where the McHaneys ran into trouble. Like most states, Texas has a so-called cottage food law that exempts certain items sold at farmers markets from the state's commercial food manufacturing regulations. Foods like bread, produce, nuts, jams, popcorn, and of course, pickles. But what constitutes a pickle, and who gets to decide? The McHaneys discovered that the Texas Department of State Health Services, DSHS, takes the narrow view. According to the DSHS, a pickle is a cucumber preserved in vinegar, brine, or similar solution. Only pickled cucumbers are allowed under the cottage food law. All other pickled vegetables are prohibited. And of course, these rules were put in place by unelected bureaucrats in the health department, not by the legislature. So in order to sell their pickled beets at the farmers market, the McHaneys needed a commercial food manufacturer's license to build a commercial kitchen, submit their recipes to a government contractor at Texas A&M University, and register for a $700 food manufacturing class. However, that class is only offered once a year. Today, the McHaneys' farm lies fallow, but they've decided to take the state of Texas to court with the help of the Dallas law firm Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, who took on the case pro bono. Their main argument is that the regulations on cottage food production are unreasonable and stifle their economic opportunities. Imagine that. They're challenging the health department's definition of pickles and subsequent regulation on the grounds that it impinges on their constitutionally protected right to earn an honest living. Jim says, "It forces you, if you want to do a pickled beet, to go to a $700 class that has nothing to do with home canning. And now we've got hundreds and hundreds of occupations where you have to pay the government to do your job." You know, we talk about pickled beets, but it's a lot bigger issue. It's about economic freedom. Good on the McHaneys. He's right, this is a much bigger issue, going all the way to such lofty and prestigious occupations as doctor and lawyer. Look, our lives existed for many years without government-mandated qualifications and licenses for their jobs, and it can and will exist that way again. As Texas already found out when the Institute for Justice brought suit for eyebrow threaders in 2015, occupational licensing is not necessary, and we do not devolve into chaos without them. If anyone actually believes the government has these rules to protect us, you are naive at best and statist at worst. It's not about protecting us. Please tell me what stopping the McHaneys from selling pickled beets has protected anyone from. Absolutely nothing. I wish these guys the very best, but unfortunately there is a reason why there's a saying, you can't fight City Hall. It's because the government makes it expensive and extremely difficult to fight them. And if you do, the deck is always stacked in the government's favor. It is a government judge, after all, that will make the final decision. They have all the incentive in the world to protect themselves and their power and their authority. Good luck, McHaneys. Thank you for listening to the show this week. As always, I need to thank my favorite game partner, Jessica, for her help with the show. For the show notes to this episode, where I put links and other information that's been on this show, go to thelavaflow.com/107. I have a new supporter this week. Matt W. became a $2.50 per episode supporter through Patreon. Wow, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. So thanks to Matt and all of my other awesome supporters, I am at $299 per episode, or 59.8% of my way towards my next goal of $500 per episode. Thank you all for your support, guys, really. Remember, when I hit this next goal, I'm going to be upping the content I bring you from half an hour per week to a full hour. I know you want more content from me, and I want to give it to you. So add your pledge today to help me bring you twice the lava flow that you're getting. Exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per-episode donation of as little as $1 an episode using Federal Reserve notes through Patreon or Bitcoin through Coinbase. I want to be able to bring you more content soon, so make sure to add your donation today to help make that happen. I have no new Apple Podcast reviews this week, but I did get an awesome email from a guy in Sweden that I wanted to share with you guys. He says, "Hi, Roger. Your podcast has strongly contributed in changing my political views for the better. Your accessible, no bullshit presentation of libertarian ideas gives me so much food for thought that I had to look up more libertarian material to satisfy my curiosity. This led me to reading up on Rothbard, Hoppe, Walter Block, Friedman, and so on, which in turn completely changed how I view society. Thanks for a great podcast that ignited the spark that led me from far-right statism to actually striving for true freedom. Best regards from the country with a 54% income tax, Sweden." And this is why I continue to do this show each and every week. You, the listener. I've had so many emails, messages, reviews, financial supporters, and even face-to-face testimonies similar to this one that make it easy to continue doing what I do. I love hearing stories like this one. Thank you so much for this email, Swede, and keep striking the root. So if you have a minute and you want to hear your review on this show, please go to thelavaflow.com/Apple and leave me a rating and a review. All the cool kids are doing it. Thank you to everyone who's left me a rating and a review so far. You guys rock. To all of you who haven't, can you guys help me out and go leave a review for me? Go to thelavaflow.com/Apple to do that now. Until next time, keep striking the root.
Thank you for listening to The Lava Flow at thelavaflow.com. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now at thelavaflow.com/subscribe. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.